Sorry, I'm playing Genshin while he does history with Hubby because he wanted to do it a little bit earlier, and I didn't expect it.
Sorry. You are streaming, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, chat.
There we go. Makes it a little bit easier for me to see. I'm not reading this. I'm gonna fuck around and find out.
Okay, yeah, so you cut out my explanation for why it's D&D lore. So I'm still on satyrs. I can finish the chapter on satyrs. So kind of a mix of Greek mythology and D&D lore here. And then I will get into reading the history in a moment. So you cut out the very important part of my rant, sorry, honey. So the thing with satyrs is that they are very dude bro. You know, they're I don't know, are you recording?
Yes, I'm just trying to be silent so it doesn't pick up multiple.
Okay, sorry. So the thing with satyrs is that in Faerun and in mythology, you can kind of equate them to Andrew Tate. You know, like that was the core part of my rant on stream let's say last week, but it was before. So that's the most important thing. They're very dude bro, and they will sleep with anything, regardless of if that thing wants it or not. You know? Which is the kind of the lore implication of why you shouldn't play a female satyr in D&D anyway. Anyway, back to actually reading the chapter. However, two other species, satyrs and centaurs, were on par with humans, or even somewhat lower, though there were exceptions who far outclassed the average mortal. As the woodland companions of Dionysus and nymphs, it comes as no surprise to discover that satyrs were enthusiastically dedicated to wine, women, and song. In fact, satyriasis is the modern medical term for men who suffer from excessive and uncontrollable sexual desires. In women, the equivalent condition is known as nymphomania. The ancients believed that the satyrs' surrender to sensuality was a major moral failing. Nevertheless, since the species managed to enjoy life to a greater degree than most humans, the ancients had grudgingly to admit that perhaps the satyrs were onto something, apart from passing nymphs. There were different types of satyrs, though by definition all were male. Young satyrs were satyriski, and the ancient horse-tailed variety were called Seleni, or Selenus, or Selenus, the companion of Dionysus. Though these gradually lost their equine qualities with the evolution of myth and became conflated with the carpine, goat-footed creatures who were properly called hannies. Despite their decadent lifestyles, all satyrs enjoyed robust health, though they had the tendency to go bald early, which accentuated the knobbly horns on their heads. Fawns were technically a different species, but even the ancients soon abandoned the distinction. Nor are fawns related to fawns, as the latter get their name from Old English. Satyrs were respected for having stood by Dionysus in his madness, and the satyr plays at the Athenian festivals are not to be confused with modern satirical plays. Satire has a different etymology. The raffish Hermes also enjoyed their company. Exceptional satyrs include the musical Marsyas and Krotos, whose skill as a drummer made him a friend of the muses. Onophiles, wine lovers, are invited to raise a glass to Lennius, the ancient satyr who had become the patron of winemakers, and another glass, and another, and another, and another to Silenus, the satyr who had become the patron of drunken excess. In an ancient fable, a satyr wandered into the woods on a winter's day, came across a man who had been caught by the cold snap. The satyr was intrigued by the man's behavior. He asked what he was doing. The man explained that his hands were freezing and he was blowing on them to warm them. Touched by the man's plight, the satyr took him home and gave him a bowl of soup to heat him up. The soup was very hot, and as soon as the man blew on it to cool it down, the satyr threw him out, saying the man's breath could not be warming and cooling at once. This is why today an inconsistent attitude is called blowing hot and cold. Ischion, son of Ares, this is centaurs, by the way. Ischion, son of Ares, was generally bad luck. He killed his father-in-law, and on being forgiven by Zeus, he went on to conceive a passion for his own grandmother, Hera. Zeus suspected that Ischion was up to no good, and shaped the clouds into Nephili, a being who exactly resembled Hera. Ischion's lustful assault on Nephili resulted in him being eternally tied to a fiery wheel. The wheel was embodied by a nymph called Lynx, whose wheel was also used by enchanters, which is the origin of the modern jinx. The rape also resulted in Nephili becoming pregnant, and when her waters broke, the resultant shower of rain produced the centaurs. Centaurs were found on the borders of the civilized world, and though intelligent, they were born of violent lust and easily lost their self-control, like satyrs. They were swayed by their passions. Unlike satyrs, however, centaurs were powerful creatures, and a passionate centaur was extremely dangerous. Siennis, the woman who Poseidon transformed into an invulnerable male warrior, met his/her end when the centaurs pounded her/him into the earth with the trunks of pine trees. Attempts by humans to befriend the centaurs invariably foundered on rock unseen that was the core of the centaur character. Or the rock of unreason was the core of the centaur character. Pirithous, the Thessalian king, or the Thessalian king, invited the centaurs to attend his wedding. The centaurs promptly got drunk and made an assault on the bride and her female attendants, and the wedding became a pitched battle. This is described by Ovid in his exile. It is excitable and gory best. Quote, falling backwards, he died, his feet drumming the blood-drenched grounds, blood fountains both from his mouth and his wound, mixed in part with brain matter and wine. His brothers, alike in their nature, were inflamed by his death, and stirred each other to action, bellowing in unison, "To arms! To arms!" They were made berserk by wine, and in that opening battle, cups, delicate jars, and round basins, all the things designed for the feast, were now sent flying or employed as weapons of war and death. Even a wise and civilized centaur, such as Philophus, was a dangerous friend. For when he entertained Heracles in his cave, the scent of wine was enough to stir the other centaurs into a dangerous fury. The hero claimed matters in the way that he knew best, by killing every centaur in sight. This included Pholus, who accidentally got a poisoned arrow in his foot, but was rewarded for his well intentions with disastrous hospitality by a birth in the constellation of Centaurus, of which Alpha Centauri is the closest star to our own galaxy. Chiron, the tutor of Achilles, was another good centaur, as he was of different star, being a child of Kronos and a nymph. Nevertheless, Chiron contributed to Achilles' savage nature by feeding him warm blood from his kills. Chiron was interested in medicine, hence the name of the medical plant, Century. Despite this, he had no remedy for the agony he suffered when struck by an arrow tipped with the Hydra's poison, yet again the arrow courtesy of Heracles, and voluntarily gave up his immortality to be placed among the stars. Though officially connected with the constellation Centaurus, Chiron's association with archery had led to the constellation of Sagittarius, being commonly depicted as a centaur. Chapter 6: Heroes and their quests. Before the time of Homer, a hero was simply someone able to afford a full panoply of armor and ideally a chariot as well. But after the likes of Heracles and Perseus had entered classical mythology, a hero was a semi-divine figure who could converse with the gods on a regular basis, and who, with the gods' help, achieved superhuman feats. It is because it makes one feel capable of such achievements that the dangerously addictive opiate is called heroin. Heroic feats usually ended with a monster dead, and the Earth a bit more orderly and safer for humanity. While there were hundreds of minor myths featuring heroes great and small, most of these myths were subplots related to events recounting in the following chapters. The basic heroic quest. A hero's lot was to reach some distant thing and either kill it or bring it home, or both in the case of Perseus. The paths to the hero's destination was often blocked by obstacles that could only be overcome with divine help and a hero's naive wit. Frequently, the hero started with major disadvantages, such as a malign destiny or a deeply antagonistic goddess. In the case of heroic children of Zeus, the latter could be taken as read, thanks to Hera. Or read, thanks to Hera. Though the heroes of myth sometimes met sticky ends, they shared a common constellation with heroes of all times and places. They generally got the girl. Essentially, the heroic quest went through the following stages. Part 1. Origins. Commoners need not apply. The great heroes of myth are noble or even semi-divine. Jason, leader of the Argonauts, may have been of royal birth, but others, such as Heracles, son of Zeus, were positively slumming in his company. Part 2. The malign destiny. A hero is born with the cosmic dice weighted against him. Since attempting to avoid one's destiny is invariably futile, most heroes concentrate on sharing the pain with as many deserving victims as possible. Part 3. Into bondage. Somehow, our hero ends up in the power of a nasty king who sends him on a carefully contrived, powerful suicide mission. Part 5 is assistance. While completing his task, our hero obtains heroic improvements and assistance, divine or non-divine. Part 6. The journey. Our hero proceeds to his destiny, generally leaving a trail of corpses along the way. With Heracles, the combination of vindictive goddess and club-happy hero made the carnage particularly intense. And Part 7. Doing the deed. This was sometimes stirring, and sometimes anticlimactic moment when the mission was accomplished. Part 8 is going home, see Part 6 with extra corpses. Part 9 was the aftermath. The hero returns, usually having picked up female company. This is often the point where the nasty king dies messily. Perseus, getting ahead. Origins, son of Danae and the line of Danos, the grandson of King Asterius and son of Zeus, king of the gods. His malign destiny, Perseus was fated to kill his grandfather, which led to Asterius trying to make sure his daughter never conceived a child. This failed when Zeus penetrated her chamber as a shower of radiant gold. Into bondage. After being exiled with his mother, Perseus grew up under King Polydectes, who decided to marry his mother. Polydectes levied a tax of horses on Perseus, which he knew the hero could not pay. So Perseus went on to find Medusa, the Gorgon, and kill her, bringing back their head in lieu of an unpaid horse tax. There was Medusa, the Gorgon. There were 3 Gorgons, sisters blessed with great beauty, though of these, only Medusa, literally queen, was mortal. Sadly, the Gorgons were inordinately proud of their good looks, and this led to their boasting that their beauty exceeded even that of the great gods. This impudence might have been passed unnoticed, had Medusa not gone on to have sex with Poseidon in the temple of Athena. Athena probably curses the Gorgon with a hideous appearance. She dedicated particular attention to Medusa, turning her lustrous ringlets into hissing serpents, and made her overall appearance so terrible that all who saw her were promptly turned to stone. Perseus' assistance was an adamantine sword and a bronze shield from Hermes, who also lent his winged sandals, advice on how to find Medusa from Athena, and a cap of invisibility from some friendly nymphs. The journey. Perseus was guided to a cave with 3 hags who knew the Gorgon's whereabouts. These 3 women had but 1 eye and 1 tooth between them. In what was far from the finest moment, Perseus intercepted the eye being passed from hand to hand and terrorized the old ladies into giving him the information. On leaving, he dropped the eye into a nearby lake. because most heroes are dickheads.
健康であるにもかかわらずそう感じるということは、
That's not in the
あなた
book,
の
that's
今の
me.
状況は
That's
いささか複雑
most
である
heroes are dick.
Relatable.
体を蝕む病には大抵原因があり、治療法も存在するものです。しかし、体の
You know,
外から来
like
る病となると、
he
医者
had
では
no
処置が
reason
難しく
to
なり
do
ます。
it. They gave him the information. He was like, thanks.
例え
Now
ば、
find your eye.
呪いや不術などがありますが、今の段階では判断し
What
かねます。
dickhead?
ただの過労による精神疲労かもしれません。こうしましょう。この病室をお貸ししますから、まずはゆっくり休んでください。
fucking muffin that's the
どの
size
よう
of
な
a
原因で
fucking
あれ、
baseball.
糸口は必ず現れます。
Oh man, I could go
対
for
処
a
法を
muffin
練
right
る
now.
にしても、まずは病巣を
I
明
have
ら
an
かにし
issue
ません
though.
か。
安心しろ。精神的な
My
病を患って
issue
る
is
人なら
sunburn.
たくさん見てきた。とりあえ
Do you
ず
not
心
have
が落ち
aloe
着く
vera?
子を炊いとくからぐっすり寝た後
I have aloe vera drink.
私と長生は精神疲労に関する古書を調べてみます。
Wrong type of aloe
何か
vera.
手がかりが見つかるかもしれません。
I have a bottle of aloe vera water, but no, I do not have aloe vera.
もっと詳しい人を見つけた方
Anyway,
がいいかも
made
しれない
invisible
な
by the cap and using his shield as a mirror so that he did not look directly at Medusa, Perseus severed the head and fled with his winged sandals, while the other Gorgons were still trying to work out what had happened. In other words, he walked up behind her, said, "Sneak attack!" stabbed, cut off her head, and then ran away.
Okay, Black Star.
Getting home, after a stopover in Egypt, Perseus happened upon Andromeda chained to a rock for consumption by a sea monster. This was because Cassiopeia, Andromeda's mother, had offended the gods with boasts of her divine beauty. Perseus killed the monster, married Andromeda, and petrified his former fiancée and reunited with Medusa's head when they objected. Oh yeah, he was set to get married to someone and then decided, no, this one's hotter. So he turned his fiancée into stone.
What the actual fuck?
He's Greek, he's a dickhead. Well, okay, more accurately, he's a Greek hero. He's a dickhead. Aftermath. King Polydectes was also petrified, and Danae saved from wedlock. Perseus inadvertently lobbed a misthrown discus at his grandfather during a sporting event, killing him as scheduled by prophecy. Unusually for an ancient myth, Perseus and Andromeda did live happily ever after, even though she might have questioned him about why the fuck he murdered his fiancée. Footnotes. The Gorgon's head was often painted on the shield of Athenian hoplites, perhaps in the hopes that it would afford the same protection as the original head, which ended up on the impenetrable aegis of Athena. Perses, son of Perseus, went east and became an ancestor to the Persian nation. On their deaths, Perseus, Andromeda, and Cassiopeia were transported to the heavens. Andromeda is an entire galaxy, while Perseus is but a constellation. The star Beta in this constellation represents the Gorgon's head, but it may not be advisable to look at it for too long.
旅してきてこんなこと初めてだよな。それでもお前が起きた時は間違いなくベッドの。よし、じゃあ今日はね、それか。
亡くなったみたいか。
Bellerophon, the Lycian Air Force.
肉体は完
The
全であっ
Lycian
て
Air
も
Force.
魂
Origins.
が欠けている。
His father
このまま
was
放っておけば
Gallicus, king of the
心が枯れ
Corinth,
てしまうだろう。
and he was a grandson of Sisyphus, originally a dashing young fellow called Hippophonius. Our hero killed a man called Belarus, Bellerophon means killer of Belarus,
オイラたちは先に
and was
そこを
exiled
離れた
to
から
Argos.
お前とはそれっきりになっちゃったけど、あとタルタリアがお前を
His
探して
malign
たぞ。
opinion is that he
どう
didn't
して
have
万
one.
人堂にいる
Oh,
の？
is that
オイラたちに会い
Scarlet?
に来たのか？
What's it his?
さっきなんか言ったの
Scarlet,
お
I
前か？
smell. I love you, Scarlet.
何を見た？
Is that boy smell? I smell boy.
No,
警戒心が強い。
no, don't
まあそれも
you
無理は
start.
By the way, I am streaming.
店主
I am
酒を
aware, which is why I didn't go any further. I mean,
Who's
even
that?
just I mean, it is. If I remember correctly, that was originally said on stream, so it is safe for stream.
Isn't it an Undertale reference?
I'm pretty sure it was a Shondo thing.
お前の問題に
Yeah,
関与
Shondo
する
said
としよ
it,
う
but
か
I think it's
私にとってはどち
Anyway.
らでもいいことだ。
into bondage. In
ゆえにこちら
Argos,
から歩める
Bellerophon
権利も
won
ない。
the heart of Queen
私を信用
Anteria.
するかどうかはお前
This was
次第
bad news,
もし助けを
as
必要とする
Antera
なら早め
was
に言
already
え。
married to the local king.
私がこの酒を飲み終えるまでにな。
When Bellerophon spurned
この近くで
Antera's
軽度のアビス
advances,
ランデ
she
ィを発
falsely
見したた
accused
め、
him of rape.
それを調べに来た。
Suicide
お前
mission.
たちに会っ
This
たの
was to
は偶
perform
然だ。
various deeds
お
in
前の
Lycia
魂は
in
欠け
Asia
てい
Minor,
て、
but
傷
mainly
口には
slay the
アビスに
Chimera,
侵食され
the
た跡が見える。
child of the terrifying Typhon.
これ以上は言
This
わ
was
な
a
くてもわかるだ
fire-breathing
ろう。
horror which had the forequarters of a lion, the middle of a she-goat, and the tail of a snake, for which reason chimera is a modern medical term, shorthand for any transatlantic animal.
確かにそうだな。
So
それにスカー
there
ト
was
ってかな
I
り
was
怪し
saying
いやつだ
recently,
け
it
ど。
it was quite a while ago, but there was recently a pig born with chimerism
2、7、10。
in the fact that it had
さて、
0.00001% human
俺が
DNA
見
in
た
it.
のは
Damn, someone is freaky.
Nope, that was naturally occurring.
その空間の切り
Aha, that's what they want you to
事情は
think.
理解した。
That's what they want you to think. They want you to think they're not freaks. No, literally, that was unironically naturally occurring.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, assistants, the weird horse, Pegasus, and his lesser known brother, Sheriasor, father of Graham, was the fruit of the illicit affair between Medusa and Poseidon. When Medusa's blood, still fertile with Poseidon's seed, leaked to the ground, it created Pegasus. For Poseidon was also, of course, the horse god. Pegasus flew to Greece, and where it landed on Mount Parsinus, a spring leapt from his hoofprints. This was the Hippocrene, the font of inspiration for many a poet. When Bellerophon appealed to Athena for assistance, she gave him a magical harness with which he tamed Pegasus. The journey, uneventful though Bellerophon had been sent with a note for his new host, the king of Lycia, that instructed that Bellerophon be killed on arrival. Fortunately, the host did not read the note until later. Doing the deed, Bellerophon used a lead spear, which he thrust down the Chimera's throat. When the Chimera breathed fire, it melted the spear and the monster choked to death. Bellerophon remained in Lycia. By now aware that he was supposed to kill his guest, the king sent Pegasus and Bellerophon against a series of enemies, but the pair triumphed every time. Finally, the king abandoned his malign intentions, confessed all, and allowed Bellerophon to marry his daughter. Aftermath. Bellerophon grew restless with peace and prosperity and became arrogant. Eventually, he tried to ascend to Olympus on Pegasus. Zeus sent a gadfly to sting Pegasus, who bucked violently, and Bellerophon fell. He was crippled, disfigured, and far from home. Hated by the gods, he wandered the plain alone, eating his heart out to avoid the ways of men. Since he died in exile, it is fitting that Bellerophon was one of the ships that took Napoleon Bonaparte to his exile on St. Helena. And footnotes. Pegasus was mortal, and on his death became a constellation. He remained one of the most durable symbols of the classical myths, and has appeared on a host of products. Indeed, this text was written on a computer manufactured by a company that was called Pegasus, for the first 3 letters were dropped from the name, or Asus. You know, the laptop brand. Well, I say laptop brand. I have an Asus laptop. It's shit. It's broken now.
I have an Asus motherboard.
Yeah, exactly. It's short for Pegasus.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? There's Jason. Origin. Son of minor Philistine royalty, owing to a complex mix-up, he was raised by the centaur Chiron. Or Chiron, it's up to you. Malign destiny. The malign destiny was that King Peleus, against whom Hera had a grudge, Peleus was warned to beware of a man with one sandal into bondage. Jason's error was to turn up inappropriately shod, having lost a sandal in a river, to the court of the murderous but justifiably paranoid tyrant. His suicide mission was to bring the Golden Fleece back to Thessaly. The origins of the Golden Fleece lie with Nephele, who married the first king of Thessaly and had 2 children, Helle and Pherex. The Thessalian king was polyamorous and had a second wife, the daughter of Cadmus and Harmonia, who was fiercely jealous of the children. The wife contrived to sabotage the kingdom's harvest by parching the seed grains. When the king sent to Delphi to find out what had happened, she bribed the messengers to report that all would be well if Nephele's children were sacrificed to the gods. Nephele got word of the plan and used her divine connections to get a magical ram from Hermes. The children fled east on the ram, though Helle fell off during the crossing between Europe and Asia and drowned in the waters, which are called the Hellespont after this occasion. Phrixus arrived safely in Colchis on the shores of the Black Sea, where he sacrificed the ram to the gods and nailed its golden fleece to a tree. It was subsequently guarded by a dragon. The ram became the constellation of Aries, Latin for ram. Aries raising signified to farmers that it was time to sow their grain. Sowing earlier results in the grain becoming parched, which was how the entire episode came about. Or let's say pseudo-Hyginus in his Astronomica. His assistants. Jason gathered a band of adventurers, including Orpheus the musician, 2 sons of Hermes, and a son of Peleus, the Dioscuri, and the superhero Heracles. He then built a ship, the Argo, to Athena's instructions. As the ship's prow was built from one of the sacred oaks of the Oracle of Zeus, Dodona, the ship itself was sentient and not shy about expressing its opinions. The journey. Pause in the Isle of Lemnos, where the women had killed their menfolk and were living alone. These ladies welcomed the boatload of heroes with what many politely called open arms. Jason had several children with the queen. I can't say her name. Hypsipyle. The stop at Hellespont, where King Xerxes attacked the crew. Attacking a boatload of heroes was always a mistake. Triply so if the crew included Heracles, which it did. Xerxes was buried by the town, which took his name and became a considerable city in ancient times. Sundry obstacles, including floating rocks that crashed any ship that sailed between them. The Argonauts were guided by the blind seer, Phineus, whom they had saved from the Harpies. Later, the music of Orpheus took the crew unscathed past the dreaded sirens. During the deed, the fleece was in the care of King Aeetes, brother of Thisbe, whom promised to hand it over as soon as Jason did a bit of ploughing and seeding. The bulls that were to pull the plough were the brazen-footed, man-killing variety, and the seeds were dragon teeth that instantly sprouted homicidal armed men. However, Jason had caught the eye of Aeetes' daughter, the very, very formidable witch, Medea. Medea drugged the bulls and advised Jason to throw stones at the armed men as they sprang up, so they killed each other in the brawl that followed. The dragon guarding the fleece attempted to swallow Jason, but Medea made the beast give up its meal forthwith. Aeetes set sail in pursuit when the Argos left with the fleece, but Medea had brought along her little brother for just this eventuality. By chopping up the unfortunate lad and dropping chunks overboard at regular intervals, she forced her father to abandon the chase to retrieve enough of the body for burial. For Medea's horrible crime, the Argonauts needed to be purified by the witch Circe. Aftermath. Medea, persuaded by the daughter of King Peleus that they could bring their father youth and eternal life by cutting him into. When the page lets me. Oh, damn it! Why is this page doing this?
It's a sticky page, I wonder why. With a page about that
Yeah, because my little brother fucking spilled tomato sauce on my book.
Aha. Sure, tomato sauce. You sure it's not mayonnaise or some other white sticky liquid?
Yes, I'm sure. Screw you.
If you want, you're on
Could bring
stream.
their father youth and eternal life by cutting him into mincemeat and boiling the bits. When Peleus did not return from the soup, Jason and Medea were exiled. After living in Corinth for 10 years, Jason divorced Medea to marry the Corinthian princess Glaus, a descendant of Sisyphus. Medea gave Jason's new wife a spectacular wedding dress, which burst into flames when the bride put it on, a case where the bride did truly look radiant. The intense heat killed both Glaucius and her father. After the killing of her children by Jason, Medea fled to Athens in a chariot drawn by dragons. This left Jason a broken man, sitting in the shadow of his beloved Argo, dreaming of past glories. But the ship had become decrepit, and the rotted prow dropped on Jason and killed him. The story of Medea was another hit to the ancient Greek playwright Euripides. Plainly, the elder says the temple of Argive, Juno, in Etruria, was reported to have been founded by Jason, if the Argonauts. This suggested that he made a huge and otherwise unrecorded detour. Psyche and Cupid. This everyday tale of a girl meets boy god, girl loses boy god, girl gets boy god is a late addition to the Mythology corpus, and appears in one of only two surviving novels from ancient Rome, The Golden Ass of Asclepius. Origins uncertain. Psyche is Greek for soul, but daughter of a king and an exceptional, therefore perilous beauty. Malign destiny, the envious wrath of Venus. This is a Roman tale, after all. into bondage. Sent by Venus to sabotage Psyche's love life, Cupid fell in love with the girl himself, and she, of course, with him. He carried her to a place where Psyche had everything but the sight of her husband, whom she was forbidden to see. When she broke the rules and looked at her husband, Cupid fled, leaving Psyche at Venus's mercy. Venus ordains that to reclaim Cupid, Psyche must perform an ever more lethal series of tasks. Sorting a huge basket of mixed grain, accomplished by sympathetic hands, getting wool from golden but murderously vicious sheep, accomplished with the help of a friendly river god. Getting water from an inaccessible cliffside spring guarded by venomous serpents, done so by a helpful eagle, and going to the underworld and returning with a gift from Persephone, which Psyche gamely attempted but failed at the last, falling into an eternal sleep. Getting home, Cupid, who had forgiven Psyche, awakened her. He had considerable bargain power, since if he went on strike, neither human nor animal would feel any urge to reproduce, and he used this power to force a council of the gods, at which Jupiter himself decreed that Psyche should marry Cupid, and that by drinking ambrosia, Psyche would become immortal. In this case, where the lovers literally did live happily ever after, with the emphasis on ever, a child of Cupid and Psyche is voluptuous, the goddess of sensual delights. There's Atlanta, trials of a heroine. Origin. Atlanta's father wanted a boy, so disappointed was he when his wife bore him a daughter that he left the child to die in the wilds of Arcadia. However, in a sort of prequel to this story of Romulus and Remus, Atlanta was adopted by a wild animal. In her care, she was suckled by a she-bear until some hunters happened by and took over the task of rearing the wild child. The hunters did an exceptional job, as Atlanta turned out to be a great runner, wrestler, and archer, as well as an exceptional beauty. She defeated the father of Achilles in a wrestling match and casually slew 2 centaurs who tried to rape her. She was among those who volunteered to accompany Jason on the Argo, but Jason declined her offer, wisely considering the effect this tomboy beauty would have on his testosterone-laden crew. Hell yeah, ancient Greece had a thing for tomboys. Let's go! Blind destiny. When irresistible beauty meets an immovable commitment, something has to give. Atlanta set her own mission in life. She was determined to remain a virgin at all costs. Given her exceptional abilities and beauty, this was no easy task, as the entire male population of Greece took her attitude as a challenge. But matters were made even more complicated by Aphrodite, who generally seemed to have regarded virginity as a personal affront, but especially so when stridently expected by a beautiful maiden. Her obstacles. The next bit of unrestrained piggery that Atlanta had to face was not that of male chauvinistic variety, but a huge rampaging wild boar. This creature had been inflicted in the region of Claydon, in Greece, by Artemis as punishment for after the king had forgotten to sacrifice to her. With his countryside being torn apart at a great rate, the king appealed for all of the heroes in the land to join in a massive boar hunt. Several recent Argonauts took up this challenge and thus ended up adventuring alongside Atlanta after all. One of these Argonauts was a handsome young prince called Melegar. Atlanta was instrumental in slaying the boar, as it was her arrow that mortally wounded the beast. However, some of the other hunters were reluctant to award the prize, or skin, to a mere woman. Melegar was determined that Atlanta should have the skin. This became a major controversy that pitted Melegar against his uncles and resulted in the death of both his uncles and indirectly of himself too. The ancient travel writer Pausanias records a spring in southern Greece, which he was believed to have gushed from a rock that Atlanta struck with her spear. One day, in Melegar's infancy, as the baby was laying by the fire, the three fates appeared, and the child's mother heard them discussing his future. 2 of the fates, Clotho and Lycaeus, had prepared a noble future for the infant. But Atrophos, who cuts the thread of human lives, sadly looked at a log on the fire and said, "He will die as soon as this branch is burned up." As soon as the fates vanished, the mother hastily pulled the flaming log from the fire, extinguished it, and locked it securely away. Melegar grew up to enjoy a happy future the other two fates had predicted. However, Melegar came into conflict with his relatives and ended up slaying his uncles in battle. Infuriated by the death of her brothers, the mother pulled out the log she had stored for so many years, threw it on the fire. Although after Melegar's death, she was so remorseful that she hung herself. Other relatives of Melegar's went on to play major parts in the later myth, including a sister, Dianeria. Dianeria, yeah. No. Dianeria. I can't say it. Dianera, who married and inadvertently killed Heracles, and nephew, Diomedes, who was a mighty warrior in the Trojan War. During the deed, Atlanta thereafter was more disillusioned with the male gender than ever. She was, however, reconciled with her father, who desired her to marry. Atlanta agreed on one condition. Instead of her suitors pursuing her, she would pursue them with a weapon. The contest would be a foot race, with Atlanta's hand and virginity as the prize. However, anyone who failed to stay ahead of Atlanta would be killed when the fleet-footed huntress caught up. Atlanta was very attractive, but she was also very fast, and soon an impressive number of heads adorned the side of the racetrack, struck from the necks by their lovelorn owners. Aphrodite decided it was time to intervene directly. Her instrument was a young man called Hippomenes, whom she equipped with 3 irresistible golden apples. As the pair sprinted along, Hippomenes let fall a golden apple every time he heard Atlanta closing in on him. Atlanta stopped each time to gather the apple, both because she could not resist the attractive fruit and because she thought she had the measure of her opponent. It may very well be that Aphrodite had weighed the dice even more firmly in the young man's favour, for as it will be seen, Atlanta was very strongly attracted to her quarry. In any case, Atlanta was second over the finish line. She had lost her race, but had gained 3 heavenly apples and rather the last once. The aftermath was, regrettably, Hippomenes decided to give thanks for his victory to Zeus, which irked Aphrodite considerably. Consequently, she goaded the young couple into a state of such overwhelming lust that they buckled down to have sex then and there, defiling the sacred temple of Zeus in the process. Zeus could not overlook such an affront to his dignity, and he turned the newlyweds into lion and lioness. Atlanta was an innocent victim in all this, but it is uncertain whether she objected to being turned into a powerful huntress, who, with her mate thereafter, roamed carefree in the wild hills of Arcadia. Chapter 7. The Golden Age of Mythology. Oh yeah, that was a whole last chapter I just read, by the way.
What?
Any
No
questions?
way.
Shut up, you! Any questions?
Yeah, I got one. Well, it's not so much a question, more of a statement. Something I think you might have already read or might be reading later.
Okay.
But in ancient Greece, wasn't it commonly believed that male lions couldn't sort of breed with their own species because female lions looked so different?
Yes. Yeah.
I remember reading that somewhere or being told it by someone, probably you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, since we're on the topic of lions, I wanted to sort of mention that.
So
You
that story of Atlantia is also part of the reason as to why it's ancient Greek tradition that you throw an apple at someone if you wish to propose to them.
Catch this fucking apple, Novi.
No! Ow! Stop throwing apples at me.
Catch it for fuck's sake.
No. Ow! My sunburn. How long has the stream been going?
Your recording has been going on for 50 minutes.
Holy shite. Would you like me to end there, or?
You can, but I'll still be playing Genshin for a while. So I want to get all the new quests done.
Okay, I shall end there at chapter 7.